Let's make one thing perfectly clear about an issue so many have either overstated or ignored. Election fraud is real. It happens. And it often gets prosecuted, as it should. And there's a really big case that just happened with not a single mention on any of the major cable news networks. Yesterday, disgraced former Pennsylvania Democratic Congressman Michael Ozzie Myers pled guilty to charges related to stuffing ballot boxes on behalf of Democratic candidates from 2014 to 2018.
Have you heard about this former congressman who was convicted and sentenced to 2 years in prison for election fraud? No? Well, what about how election officials fear that poll workers in the 2022 midterms may not be trustworthy? We're going to talk about those stories and more. I'm your host, Hyde. This is Hide and Seek Media. Hello, all you beautiful and amazing people. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to the show. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you get notified anytime I drop a new video. The show is brought to you by the Hide and Seek Media store. Get the merch link in the description down below. And if you use code 1776, I'll give you 20% off your entire order. With the most crucial elections in this country's history just around the corner, more eyes are going to be watching the polls than ever before to ensure that we have a safe and fair election. Now, in 2020, we remember that there was a secret bipartisan campaign to fortify the election. And in that secret bipartisan campaign, part of their efforts to fortify was to ensure they had their own poll workers in these polling stations. And let's not forget that in places like Detroit, windows were boarded up so that poll watchers could not see the votes being counted. And yet that was deemed the safest and most secure election in this country's history. So the fact that this is now a concern just goes to show how the Democrats continue to confess by projecting what they do onto their opponents. And the reason why the story about the congressman is important is because while his was done on a small scale, what he did could be done on a large scale if certain rules and laws were changed. So if your curiosity has brought you to the edge of the rabbit hole and you're willing, let's jump in.
I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
I have this first story here from the Daily Wire. Former Democrat congressman jailed for committing election fraud to help Democrats. A former U.S. congressman, a Democrat, was sentenced to more than 2 years in jail last week for committing election fraud intended to help Democrat candidates. Former Rep. Michael Ozzie Myers, 79, who represented a district in Pennsylvania, pled guilty to conspiracy to deprive voters of civil rights, bribery, obstruction of justice, falsification of voting records, conspiring to illegally vote in a federal election, and orchestrating schemes to fraudulently stuff the ballot boxes for specific Democratic candidates in the 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018 elections. The U.S. Department of Justice said in a statement. So we're going to take a pause right there because you notice how many years this guy did this. Now, if you don't know who former Congressman Michael Ozzie Myers is, this guy was a congressman from 1976 to 1980, I believe, somewhere around in there. And he was expelled from Congress and convicted of bribery and went to jail for bribery. But yet there were judges and other candidates who trusted this guy, knowing his background, knowing he was a convicted felon, still gave this man money to run their campaigns and get them elected. And this is what they got. The Daily Wire goes on to report, United States District Court Judge Paul S. Diamond sentenced Myers to 30 months in prison with 3 years of supervised release for his crimes and ordered Myers to pay $100,000 in fines with $10,000 of that due immediately. Fox News reported that Myers served 4 years in that U.S. House from 1976 to 1980, but was expelled and thrown in prison for 3 years after being convicted of bribery. The DOJ noted that Myers admitted in court that he bribed a judge of elections into illegally adding votes for certain candidates of their mutual political party in primary elections in a fraudulent scheme that lasted several years. Myers also admitted to conspiring to commit election fraud with another former judge of elections, the DOJ added. So let's also remember that where this guy did this, in Philadelphia, there were polling stations where Republican poll watchers were not even allowed in the building. It's not like this is just one little symptom, right? This is a major problem. And if this had been going on since 2014 in Pennsylvania, a highly Democratic area, and we're only just now finding out about it, and nothing else is being done about those elections and the candidates that lost in those fraudulent elections, right? Like, there needs to be some kind of restitution for those candidates. That's just my opinion, though. Let me know what you think down in the comments. But let's get back to the story. They say Myers solicited payments from candidates that were his clients and then used a portion of that money to bribe election officials. Voting is the cornerstone of our democracy. If even one vote has been illegally cast, or if the integrity of just one election official is compromised, it diminishes faith in the process, said U.S. Attorney Jacqueline C. Romero. This defendant used his position, knowledge of the process, and connections to fix elections for his preferred candidates, which demonstrates a truly flagrant disregard for the laws which govern our elections. He will now spend 30 months in prison as penalty for his crimes. Okay, so 30 months in prison. But the first part of that, right? Voting is the cornerstone of our democracy. Even if one vote has been cast illegally, or if the integrity of just one election official is compromised, it diminishes the faith in the process. Well, folks, that diminished faith is here. I have this story here from Politico. Election officials confront a new problem, whether they can trust their own poll workers. Several incidents in Michigan have raised wider fears about whether poll workers could use their position to sow doubt in the 2022 midterms. Now, first off, I want to say that this story is a complete contradiction to the Time magazine article from 2020 when they trusted every single one of their poll workers and had no problems with not letting Republican poll watchers in the polls or putting boards up on the windows so that poll watchers couldn't see the votes being counted, or running batches of votes after hours after everybody has been sent home. Like, when all of those things were going on, you could trust every single one of those poll workers. But now apparently you can't trust any of these poll workers in the 2022 midterms, according to corporate media. Now, that's probably because they know the Republicans are going to sweep in the 2022 midterms, and they're probably going to lose control of the House and maybe even the Senate. And so they're preparing their voters for that loss with these stories. But let's get into what Politico has to say about poll workers and whether they can be trusted. So, Politico goes on to report, election officials are growing concerned about a new danger in November, that groups looking to undermine election results will try to install their supporters as poll workers. The frontline election workers do everything from checking people in at the voting locations to helping process mail ballots. In other words, they are the face of the American elections for most voters. And now, some prominent incidences involving poll workers have worried election officials that a bigger wave of trouble could be on the horizon. Michigan, in particular, has been a hotspot. A far-right candidate for governor who lost the GOP primary encouraged poll workers to unplug election equipment if they believed something was wrong. A Michigan County GOP organization encouraged poll workers to ignore rules barring cell phones in polling places and vote counting centers. And just last week, the clerk of Kent County, Michigan, announced that a witness allegedly saw a poll worker inserting a USB drive into an electronic poll book, the list of registered voters that shows who has cast ballots during the August primary, leading to a pair of felony charges. The Kent County Clerk's office declined to comment beyond a statement issued by Clerk Lisa Posthumous Lyons last week, stressing that the incident had no impact on the election and that specific poll book would no longer be used in future elections. They go on to say, it's kind of troubling to see in the wake of 2020 this new element of election workers who are there to more police things than they are there to just perform the function of being an election worker and facilitating the democratic process in communities, said Justin Roebuck, the clerk of Ottawa County, Michigan, and the chair of the Michigan Council of Election Officials. Okay, Mr. Roebuck, do you remember this story from Time magazine? The secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election? Do you remember this article? And where it states in this article that part of their fortification of the election was getting with business owners, poll workers, and vote registering events to help fortify the election? Let me see if I can pull up the article and we'll talk about it here. Let me see if I find it here. Okay, so here it is. Here we go. This is the Time article, right? Just so that we're all clear. The secret history of the shadow campaign to save the 2020 election, right? You remember this? So in this article, right, they say later down here, so they say right here, there was a conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes, one that both curtailed the protest and coordinated the resistance from CEOs. Both surprises were the result of an informal alliance between left-wing activists and business titans. Okay? The handshake between businesses and labor was just one component of a vast cross-partisan campaign to protect the election, an extraordinary shadow effort dedicated to not to winning the vote, but to ensuring that it would be free and fair, credible and uncorrupted. For more than a year, a loosely organized coalition of operatives scrambled to shore up America's institutions as they came under simultaneous attack from the remorseless pandemic and an autocratically inclined president. Right? They go down here. They say down here, their work touched every aspect of the election. They got states to change voting systems and laws and helped secure hundreds of millions in public and private funding. They fended off voter suppression lawsuits, recruited armies of poll workers, and got millions of people to vote by mail for the first time. So, Mr. Roebuck, I ask you, was it a problem in 2020 when it was a secret shadow campaign to ensure that Joe Biden got elected? Or has it always been a problem, and now that you guys shined a light on it, it's time that we confess by projection, right? Oh, no, look, this is what we did in 2020. And we told you about it. And now that we did, we're now going to say you're doing it and it's a bad thing. You see this hypocrisy and all of this? This is why it's important that every single person get out and vote. It's why it's important that every single person, while you're at those polling stations, you're paying attention to what everybody is doing. You're making sure the poll workers are doing their jobs right. You're making sure that everyone who's voting is voting in the right way. And while election fraud is not widespread, as they say, right? It still happens. As I just pointed out, that a former Democratic congressman has been convicted of election fraud. Not to mention the multiple states since 2020 who have gotten multiple convictions for election fraud. But I'm going to leave it there. If you guys have made it all the way to the end of the video, I appreciate you watching. It really does mean a lot. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you get notified anytime I drop a new video. Smash that like button. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about this video and the topic. I love to engage with my viewers, so feel free to fire away. I'll catch y'all later. Peace.